I stood there, 8 months pregnant, as my husband called me worthless in front of his friends. He had no idea that the poor, ordinary woman he married came from one of the wealthiest families in America. When my father walked through that door, everything changed forever. Before we begin, if you love stories about karma and justice, smash that like button and subscribe. You won't believe how this unfolds. Now let me tell you my story. My name is Destiny, and I need to take you back 3 years to the night I met Trevor. It was at a charity art gallery in downtown Manhattan. One of those elegant evenings where champagne flows and people pretend to understand abstract paintings. I was there because I genuinely loved art. I worked as a museum curator, a job I'd chosen because it fed my soul, not my bank account. Trevor was there networking, as he always did, climbing that corporate ladder one handshake at a time. He approached me while I was standing in front of a stunning portrait, and I remember thinking how refreshing it was that he actually asked me about the artwork, instead of bragging about himself. We talked for hours that night. He was charming, ambitious, and he seemed to see me for who I was, not what I had. That last part was important to me because of something Trevor didn't know, something almost no one knew. My father is Robert Wellington. Yes, that Robert Wellington. Wellington Pharmaceuticals. If you've ever taken medication for blood pressure, diabetes, or a dozen other conditions, you've probably used one of his company's products. My father built an empire from nothing, and by the time I was born, he was worth billions. But growing up with that kind of wealth taught me something painful. People change when they know about money. Suddenly, you're not a person anymore. You're an opportunity, a connection, a ticket to somewhere better. So when I turned 25, I made a decision. I wanted to live independently, to find someone who would love me, not for my last name or my father's fortune. I took a modest apartment, lived on my curator's salary, and when I met Trevor, I introduced myself as Destiny Parker, using my mother's maiden name. My family respected my decision. My father, despite his power and influence, understood that I needed to find my own path, my own truth about people. Trevor and I fell fast. Within 6 months, he proposed at a small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. It felt real and honest. Our wedding was intimate, just close family and friends. My father attended, of course, but he came as simply my dad, not as Robert Wellington, pharmaceutical mogul. He wore a simple suit, drove himself there, and warmly shook Trevor's hand. Trevor had no idea that the kind, soft-spoken man hugging me was one of the wealthiest people in America. The first year of marriage was beautiful. We lived in a decent apartment in Queens, nothing fancy, but it was ours. I continued working at the museum, and Trevor worked his way up at a consulting firm. But slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice at first, things began to change. It started with small comments. We'd pass by luxury stores, and Trevor would sigh, saying things like, "One day, when we're really successful." He started obsessing over his colleagues' lifestyles, their cars, their wives' designer handbags. He'd come home frustrated, talking about how his boss's son-in-law got promoted because of family connections, how it was all about who you knew and where you came from. Then I got pregnant. I was overjoyed. I imagined Trevor would be too, but his reaction was tepid at best. His first words after congratulations were, "We need to really think about finances now. A baby is expensive." The excitement I'd felt deflated like a balloon. Over the following months, his obsession with money and status grew worse. He started making comments about my background, fishing for information about my family. "Your parents must have some savings, right? I mean, couldn't they help us out?" I deflected these questions. My parents had offered to help many times, but I'd refused. This was my test, my experiment in authenticity, and I couldn't abandon it just because things got uncomfortable. My pregnancy became complicated in the 7th month. I developed gestational diabetes, and the doctor ordered bed rest. I had to take leave from the museum. Trevor's resentment became palpable. He'd come home and find me resting, and I could see the disgust in his eyes. Must be nice to just lie around all day, he'd mutter. I tried to explain the medical necessity, but he'd wave me off. Other women work until they give birth. You're just being weak. That word, weak, he started using it constantly. I was weak for needing rest, weak for not having a wealthy family to fall back on, weak for not being like Courtney, his colleague's wife, who came from old money and never had to work a cheat that day in her life. The breaking point came on a Saturday evening, 3 weeks ago. Trevor had invited his boss, Gerald, and several colleagues over for dinner. Despite being 8 months pregnant and explicitly told by my doctor to avoid stress and excessive activity, I spent the entire day cooking and preparing. I wanted to be a good wife. I wanted Trevor to be proud of me. The guests arrived at 7. Courtney was there with her husband Brad, both of them dripping in designer labels. Gerald came with his wife Patricia, who immediately made a show of complimenting our quaint apartment. The condescension was thick enough to cut with a knife, but I smiled through it. Dinner was going as well as could be expected. I was exhausted, my feet were swollen, and I could feel my blood sugar was off. I excused myself briefly to check my glucose levels in the bathroom. When I returned, I felt dizzy. I steadied myself against the doorframe for just a moment. That's when Trevor exploded. In front of everyone, he slammed his hand on the table. "Are you serious right now, Destiny? We have important guests, and you're going to pull this dramatic weak act." The room went silent. I felt every eye on me. "Trevor, I just need to sit down for a moment. I'm not feeling—" "You're never feeling well," he shouted, standing up now. "Do you know how embarrassing this is for me? Gerald, I apologize for my wife. This is why I should have married someone from a real family with class and strength. Someone who understands what it takes to succeed." Courtney laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, Trevor, we understand. It must be hard being married to someone so ordinary. I mean, my mother always said breeding shows, especially in difficult times." I felt tears burning my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in front of these people. Trevor continued, emboldened by Courtney's cruelty. "I thought she'd be different, you know. But she's just dead weight. No connections, no family money, nothing to bring to the table except weakness. I don't remember walking to the bedroom. I just remember sitting on the edge of our bed, shaking, my hand on my swollen belly, where my daughter was moving inside me. Through the closed door, I could hear them. Oh boy. Trevor was apologizing to his guests, making excuses, laughing with them. I heard him say, "I'm trapped now, but after the baby comes, who knows? A man has to think about his future." That's when I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my father. He answered on the first ring. "Destiny. Sweetheart, what's wrong?" He could always hear it in my voice. Through tears, I told him everything. The months of cruelty, the humiliation, the words Trevor had just said. My father was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice had that steel quality I'd heard him use in business negotiations. "I'll be there tomorrow morning." And Destiny? This ends now. I barely slept that night. Trevor came to bed late, reeking of whiskey, and didn't say a word to me. The next morning, I heard voices in the living room. Trevor was still playing host, making brunch for Gerald and a few others who had apparently stayed over or returned. The sound of their laughter made me feel sick. Then the doorbell rang. I heard Trevor answer it. "Can I help you?" His tone was dismissive, probably assuming it was a delivery person. "I'm here to see my daughter," came my father's voice, calm and authoritative. I took a deep breath, put on my robe, and walked slowly toward the living room. "Your daughter." Trevor's confusion was evident. "Look, old man, I think you have the wrong apartment." The disrespect in his voice made me wince. He had no idea who he was speaking to. "I don't think I do. I'm Robert Wellington. Destiny is my daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. I reached the living room just in time to see Trevor's face transform from confusion to shock. "Wellington, you mean you're the warehouse worker she mentioned?" My father's expression didn't change, but I saw the disappointment in his eyes. "I've never worked in a warehouse. I'm the founder," and CEO of Wellington Pharmaceuticals. Perhaps you've heard of it? Gerald dropped his coffee cup. It shattered on the hardwood floor, but no one moved to clean it. Patricia's mouth hung open. Courtney had gone pale. But Trevor's face, went through a journey of emotions. Shock, disbelief, hope, and then desperate calculation. Mr. Wellington, sir, I had no idea. Destiny never said anything about, if I'd known. Trevor was scrambling now, his voice taking on that obsequious tone he used with his superiors. My father held up one hand, silencing him. His eyes swept the room, taking in every person, and finally landed on Gerald. Gerald Morrison. We've met before, haven't we? Your firm does consulting work for several companies in my network. Gerald nodded frantically. Yes, sir, yes. Mr. Wellington, it's an honor. I had no idea that Destiny was your daughter. Trevor never mentioned. No, he didn't know, my father interrupted. My daughter chose to live independently, to find out who truly valued her for herself, rather than for my name or fortune. It appears that experiment has yielded very clear results. Trevor tried to approach my father, hands outstretched in supplication. Sir, please, let me explain. There's been a misunderstanding. I love your daughter very much. Stop. My father's voice cracked like a whip. I heard quite clearly what you said about my daughter last night. Dead weight, no connections, nothing to bring to the table, weak. He turned to look at me, and his expression softened. Destiny, tell me, are those the words your husband used? I nodded, tears finally falling freely. Yes, Daddy. Those were his words. My father turned back to Trevor, and I saw the full force of his power, the same presence that commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals. My daughter is carrying saying your child. She's been medically ordered to rest, and instead of caring for her, you humiliated her in front of guests. You called her weak for having a difficult pregnancy. You wished you'd married someone else, someone with money and connections. I didn't mean it. Trevor was begging now, and it was pathetic to watch. Please, sir, I was frustrated. I wasn't thinking clearly. Oh, I think you were thinking very clearly, my father said coldly. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Richard? Yes, good morning. I need you to call David Chen. Yes, the CEO of Morrison Consulting. Tell him that Robert Wellington is requesting an immediate termination of Gerald Morrison and one Trevor Hayes. Why? Gross misconduct and character deficiencies that make them unsuitable for any position in companies I do business with. Gerald's face went from white to gray. Mr. Wellington, please. I have a family, a mortgage, and my daughter has a family too. A family you laughed at while her husband degraded her. My father's gaze was merciless. You stood by and watched a pregnant woman be abused in her own home, and you did nothing. In fact, your wife participated. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Trevor fell to his knees, in front of my father. Please, please don't do this. I'll lose everything. I'm sorry. Destiny, tell him you forgive me. I looked at this man I'd married, this man I'd loved, now groveling on the floor, and I felt nothing but sadness, not for him, but for the time I'd wasted, for the dream I'd believed in. You had something priceless, Trevor, I said quietly. You had genuine love from someone who chose you when she could have had anyone, and you threw it away because I wasn't rich enough, wasn't connected enough, wasn't good enough for your ambitions. My father's assistant appeared at the door. How he'd gotten there so fast, I didn't know, but my father had always been efficient. Sir, the papers are ready. What papers? Trevor's voice cracked. Divorce papers, my father said simply. Pre-prepared by my attorneys yesterday evening after my daughter called me. You'll sign them today, Trevor. You'll give Destiny full custody of her child. You'll vacate this apartment within 48 hours. And in exchange, we won't pursue legal action for emotional abuse and negligence. That's not fair, Trevor shouted, his desperation turning to anger. She lied to me. She pretended to be poor. My daughter lived modestly on her own salary. My father corrected. She never lied about anything. She simply didn't advertise her family connections. The fact that you're only upset now, after discovering who I am, proves exactly why she was right to keep that information private. You don't love destiny. You never did. You love the idea of what she could be if she fit your requirements. Courtney tried to slip toward the door, but my father's voice stopped her. Mrs. Bradford, you might want to tell your husband that his company also does business with Wellington Pharmaceuticals. I'll be recommending they find new legal counsel. Your comments last night about breeding in classes were particularly vile. She stammered something incoherent and fled. Gerald followed, not even looking back. Trevor remained on his knees, broken, as my father's assistant laid out the divorce papers on the coffee table. "Sign them, Trevor," I said. "Sign them and let me go." He looked up at me one last time, and I think he finally understood what he'd lost. Not the money, not the connections, but me, the woman who had loved him genuinely, who had chosen him freely. His hand shook as he picked up the pen and signed his name. 3 months have passed since that morning. I'm sitting in my childhood bedroom in my father's estate, though I know it's temporary. My daughter, Hope, I named her Hope because that's what she represents, is sleeping peacefully in her bassinet beside me. She's beautiful and perfect, and I look at her and promise that I'll teach her to value herself, to never accept less than she deserves, to understand that her worth isn't tied to anyone else's perception of her. Trevor's life unraveled exactly as my father predicted. He lost his job, his reputation in the consulting world was destroyed, and his social circle abandoned him when it became clear he had no access to Wellington money or influence. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he tried to fight the divorce, but his own words, witnessed by multiple people, made any custody claim impossible. He has supervised visitation rights, but he hasn't used them once. I've learned something profound through this experience. Hiding who you are to find authentic love doesn't work if you're not being authentic yourself. I spent so long testing Trevor, but I wasn't being honest either. In my next chapter, whoever I share my life with will know everything about me from the beginning, and I'll trust that the right person will love all of me, not in spite of my background, but because of the complete picture of who I am. My father and I have grown closer than ever. He told me he suspected things weren't right with Trevor, but wanted to respect my independence. When I finally called him that night, he said it broke his heart, but also made him proud, that I trusted him to help me when I truly needed it. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more incredible stories of karma and justice. Share this with someone who needs to remember their worth is never determined by how others treat them. What would you have done in this situation? Comment below. Thank you for watching. And remember, real strength isn't about wealth, it's about character. It's about knowing your value even when others can't see it. And sometimes, the universe has a way of revealing the truth at exactly the right moment.